All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back again, man. Thank y'all so much for coming over now. Hey, I find this video title so interesting because I hear it a lot. I hear it a lot. You hear people say they owe us reparations, and you hear it. You hear it all the time in the community. You really do. Um, and I know brother Trevor Noah be speaking out a lot about things. So I want to see what is this like an interview with them together with him and Thomas Sowell? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But I want to check this out, man. I find these videos dealing with slavery to be uh I'm a very open-minded person, and I do know a lot about the history and stuff. But like I said, when you grow up around a lot of things that you see, a lot of violence and just people like really not working, you know what I mean, towards their goals and more so looking for handouts. I just really want to see what this video is about. Because like I said, you can't tell me nothing. For those, this is my disclaimer. For those of you who don't know, all right, I'm from South Central LA in the ghetto. All right. I don't lean left. I don't lean right. I just like hearing the truth, you know? So nobody can come over here trying to tell me anything because I've been through more than most. So I just want to hear what they got to say. All right, again, appreciate all the love and support. Y'all see the shirt. Shout out to all the good humans, man. We ain't gonna waste no more time. Let's jump right into it.
So to your question, I think you have to understand what the word reparations means first.
Right.
So reparations, you are repairing something that you have broken. You are paying for something that you were supposed to pay for. I'm not saying that there aren't people living in America today who are suffering and are going through pain and strife because of what's happening when it comes to, the machines taking jobs, factories becoming industrialized.
See, I think where people get lost with reparations is wanting people who had nothing to do with a certain situation to pay for something. That's where I can truly say where everybody ties in the past to people today, and you look at a certain race and you be like, y'all owe me, you know that's what I'm talking about.
etc. But reparations is a specific conversation about a specific time in America, and that is black people were slaves.
Article that got a lot of attention in The Atlantic a couple of years ago called The Case for Reparations by Ta-Nehisi
Oh,
Coates. Quote, white supremacy is a force so fundamental to America that it is difficult to imagine the country without it. Reparations is the price we must pay to see ourselves squarely. Close quote. And Tom Sowell, who actually saw Jim Crow with his own eyes.
so like they're talking about a head start, right? That back in the day, black people were held back so much because of slavery, education wise and everything. I get that point, what they're saying, how he explained it, but I just want to see what he has on the rebuttal, I guess.
And experienced it, responds how?
It would be nice to know his evidence for what he said, just to be old-fashioned about it. No, it was a rotten system. But I don't know how we get from that to reparations. I mean, what we see in the United States in terms of the bad things, you see all around the world.
Yeah.
If you were to give reparations to everyone whose ancestors had been slaves, I suspect that you would have to give reparations to more than half the entire population of the globe.
And that goes back to that video I watched about slavery. So, look, because these videos can get really tricky. Because I told you a lot of times people get in their feelings and they don't look at the facts. This is what I'll say. And again, I don't lean left or right. But when people like today, they like to say people came with their receipts, like their facts, like they did a lot of research and investigated, and they literally found all the information that they needed to bring the truth to you, versus someone just hearing about something and presenting that as the truth. So yeah, I'm gonna try not to pause so much. This video is already 13 minutes. I ain't trying to make it like an hour long.
Slavery was not confined to one set of races. I suspect that most of the people who were either slaves or slave owners around the world were neither white nor black. I mean, this was a universal curse of the human species.
Africa, the Middle East, Asia,
Oh,
slavery took place everywhere.
and it continued elsewhere long after it was abolished in the Western countries.
Right.
You know what I mean? I've even heard people say like, oh, but there were some of the Irish who were indentured. Like, yeah, slavery. Look at the numbers, look at the time, look at the level of work. You could not work toward your freedom. For most black people in America, this was a time when you lived and died as a slave. And so that's what reparations is about.
The other thing, I have a slight sidebar in there on the history of slavery.
Mm-hmm.
The history of slavery existed all over the world for thousands of years.
So when Trevor Noah is speaking, because what he's saying, you know, I know there's a lot of truth in that, but I guess what Thomas is saying is that, because, you know, these are two separate videos, but if you play what Trevor's saying versus what Thomas is saying, it's not like he's saying Trevor isn't telling the truth, but it's not like the whole truth based upon the history. And if you really look at like that video that show. So again, I'm loving this to listen to it, because, you know, again, you look at people like Trevor Noah, who you would consider, who made it out. His brother's famous, rich, has a huge platform. So yeah.
Among all sorts of people, as far back as the history of the human species goes. It's one of many evils that the left tries to localize, when in fact it is a universal evil. But more than that,
I hate to hear that. You know, you have a good conversation like this, and then, you know, because they do say that on the left it happens the most. But I just hate when things get political, you know, although it is a kind of like a political topic. But when you actually hear them say the left or the right, it's just like,
as much as slavery is repudiated around the world today, prior to the 18th century, I know of no serious effort to abolish the institution anywhere.
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 Not in Africa, not in the Arabian
not
world.
in Africa in the 21st century. When Adam Smith wrote in 1776 that the only place in the world where slavery had been abolished completely was Western Europe. And so this was
as late as the year this country was founded.
Yes. And so the idea that this is something that the United States had that nobody else had, or the other countries that didn't have, it's been estimated that there are more slaves in India than in the entire Western Hemisphere.
man.
And that's before and after Columbus got here.
Right.
And so I hear what you're saying, but I think that's a completely separate conversation that needs to be had about the now. Because if you are not careful, what you then do is you combine everybody's suffering into the same bowl, and you make it seem like all injustices have the same weighting, and they don't. Just like crimes. You know, theft isn't the same as murder. We don't try them the same way. And as much as there is a white person who's suffering today, I feel for anybody who's suffering, because I know what it's like to be poor. I know what it's like to suffer. I didn't come from a wealthy family. We struggled when I was growing up. But I also understand that there are levels of that suffering.
And see, at least he has that background, because most people don't. Most people don't know what it's like to struggle, you know. So when you make it out and you get to a certain point, you're supposed to uplift and try to bring up people along with you. But I think in my community, and I can truly say this, I said this in my last video, you cannot help no one that don't want to be helped. Because I think a lot of people are still stuck in that slave mentality and that victim role, and they actually never were slaves. You know, your ancestors were, but not you. So you can't be using what happened to them as a stepping stool into your victimhood, if you know what I mean. You got to get out there and get it, man. Again, I know a lot of racism in the world still exists, but like I said, it's a lot of evil in this world, man. A lot. And the racism come from all races. So,
you know, and so sometimes white people, it does block a white person because you go white privilege, and a person goes, I'm poor and I'm white, where's the privilege? You know, white people are like, I wish I could activate my white privilege, I wish I could do it right now. White privilege, give me something. I get that, trust me, I get it.
yeah.
It is hard to accept that you have benefits because of the color of your skin if you cannot see the benefits that you have.
The book that I'm writing now, I discovered this is true not only in the United States, it's true in England, and the situation is wholly different. And yet, if you read the data, for example, from London, the educational tests and so forth, you see that there, immigrants from Africa pass this test they have. I'm talking about low-income people now. Nearly 60% of the time. Blacks from Caribbean, like 50%, so on. Native-born whites in the same low-income bracket pass this test 30% of the time. And it's the same thing. The foreign people come in, they haven't had generations of being steeped in the welfare state vision, the vision of grievances, victimology, and resentments, the idea that there are enemies out there dedicated to keeping you down. That's the message that's been pumped into the head of the white lower class in Britain, and that's the image that's been pumped into the black low-income people in the United States, and the results are the same in both cases.
But the thing I try to explain to a person is, think of it more like golf. Don't think of it as privilege, then think of it like a handicap, right? In golf, they acknowledge that you are in a position where you need so many advantages to be competitive in the game.
Is that we ought not to be doing this?
You know, there are various laws and policy.
Hey, man, whoever edited this video did a good job, because it almost feels like they're talking to each other, even though I know they're not. But I do get what Trevor is saying to some point, but at the same time, it falls into the mentality again in the victimhood. And I feel like he's saying that this stuff, Thomas is saying that as long as you are in that mentality, you will always feel like you're being held back, when in actuality, you really aren't. You're just looking kind of for a handout instead of going to get. That's how I feel.
Is that benefit one group at the expense of another. But I think affirmative action has the distinction of being one that it harms everybody, though in different ways. And so there's a lot of evidence that there are black kids who have all the qualifications to be successes in college, who nevertheless are failures because they are systematically mismatched with institutions whose standards they don't meet, even though they may meet the standards of 80 or 90% of the colleges in America. I remember first aware of this when I was teaching at Cornell, and I found that half the black students at Cornell were on some kind of academic probation. And so I went over to the administration building and looked up the SATs of these students. The average black student at Cornell at that time scored at the 75th percentile.
Which is pretty darn good.
Yes. And so that means that in most colleges in this country, they would have no trouble, and many of them would be on the dean's list. But at Cornell, the average liberal arts student at that time was in the 99th percentile. And when you're teaching the students like that, you teach at a pace that most people of any race cannot keep up with. And it was always complained that I was assigning all kinds of reading But heck, I'm teaching kids who are in the top 1%. They can keep up with the reading that I'm assigning.
So Cornell was taking very talented black kids and spending 4 years teaching them to feel inadequate.
Yes, and succeeding at that.
Right? So what they say is you have a handicap of 15, so that
Man, I listen to that brother talk, you make me want to go read a book. And I ain't read a book in a while. In a long while. But when I listen to him talk, he does sound like he care. And I think his messages get, is the word misconstrued? I think so. That's the right word to use to describe what I'm trying to talk about. Get misconstrued and lost because a lot of people are speaking with emotion. You know, I ain't that type of person. Like I said, you cannot come on this channel and say anything. I'm just listening to this brother speak, listening to both of them speak very clearly, very educated. And, you know, it just seems like when you come with the facts, you can't, there's no rebuttal. You can rebuttal, but it won't have no weight. You know what I mean?
means like you're going to be hitting from this tee and you get more chances to get the ball in because we understand the position you're in. And if you're a black person in America, from slavery, from day one.
Pondering all this, I noticed something, a column that you wrote, this is a couple of years ago, in which you rebutted Nicholas Kristof of the New York Times. And Kristof had ascribed the gaps between African Americans and whites in America, gaps in wealth, gaps in educational achievement, the usual gaps, to, and this is a quotation from Kristof, to the lingering effects of slavery, close quote.
Oh, yes.
And here's Tom Sowell, quote, "If we wanted to be serious about evidence, we might compare where blacks stood 100 years after the end of slavery with where they stood after 30 years of the liberal welfare state. In other words, we could compare hard evidence on the legacy of slavery with hard evidence on the legacy of liberals," close quote. And
the number of injustices that have held black people back in America amount to an insurmountable, like you look at black people's freedom, you look at black people's land, just land alone. The amount of wealth you can acquire over time if you own land is exponential, because you have the land, you have the fact that you can borrow based on the land, you have the fact that you can use the money that you have borrowed to grow more wealth, you can use it to grow your family's wealth. Just taking that away from black people alone.
Right, right. And also, if you think you've been done, if you think you've been wronged, your recourse might also be more likely to politics, to try to redress this whole redistribution,
Yes. Oh, yes.
rather than hit the books, acquire the skills, get the job.
But the other thing too, one of the my favorite statistic in there is that the poverty rate among blacks as a whole is 22%. Among whites as a whole is 11%, and among black married couples is 7.5%.
So
and it's been and black married couples have never had a poverty rate as high as 10% in any year since 1994.
All right.
His brother got the receipts.
To the cry, what is to be done? Tom Sowell answers,
It's been done.
get an education, get married, have kids after you get married. That's sort of the answer, right?
Well, yes, and the things that work for other people tend to work pretty generally.
All right.
Is crippling them. And so you combine that with slavery, and then you look at...
It's just funny because it's like when I don't know the other guy's name, but when he's asking Thomas these questions, he's like yeah. Oh man, this video is making me want to go to like my neighborhood and just like stand on the highest thing I could find and start talking to people like Lawrence Fishburne in Boys in the Hood when he was trying to deliver a message. Cause like, I think when people talk, I told y'all, people don't listen. People aren't listening because they're worried about getting the next point in. That's why I like how this video is done, because I'm not sure if they were actually sitting next to each other, if they would be like cutting each other off, or would they, but I'd say maybe they would. Maybe they would, wait to speak. Oh, man. It's like this video is upsetting me a little bit. Not like I'm furious upset, but more like a disappointed. Because I feel like if people would just listen, man, they could learn so much and really attack their goals and what they're trying to do in life in the most professional, seamless way. Very motivational. But like I'm listening to both sides. I think this is a great video to listen to, you know. But I feel like Trevor might be leaning more towards not encouraging, but just talking about the victim role. Man, you got to get out there and get it. You did. Look at you, brother.
Jim Crow laws. You didn't let black people in America live in the areas that they wanted to live in. They couldn't get loans from the banks that they wanted to get loans from. And then on top of that, when they started getting the loans from American banks were found to be giving them higher interest rates when in fact they were the same risk as many of the other races that they were giving loans.
That said fact check false. Whoa. See? I'm over here listening to him and then that popped up. Sheesh.
Higher interest rates when in fact they were the same risk as many of the other races that they were giving loans to. So when you combine all of those things, I think it's safe to say that black Americans have a conversation that they need to be having with the United States. Doesn't involve me, doesn't involve white people, it's like, yo, American government, meet the black people. That's it. Have that conversation.
In terms of political leaders, all the incentives politically are for black leaders to blame all problems in the black community on the larger society. And that enables them to take on the role of being the defender of the black community against enemies, which in turn creates the situation in which many blacks don't feel that anything that they do is going to help themselves unless it's done politically as a group. That there's no point. I mean, why would you, if you believe what they say, why would you want to knock yourself out in the school knowing that the man is not going to let you get anywhere?
And it's almost like he's saying, if that's what you believe, okay. So in your mind, it's a high risk. So I think what he's saying is high risk, high reward. Like you be amazed at what you can accomplish if you just put the work in versus just thinking like holding yourself back because you think something. Ooh, that's a bar. Shout out to Screwface. Hey, dang, that's how I. Mm-mm-mm. I've tried to help so many people, y'all. You have no clue. You have no clue how many people I've tried to help. I'm glad I don't lean any type of way because nobody can try to. Yeah, the truth is the truth. That's it.
One of the most pathetic things I heard in recent years was a young black man saying that, at one point he thought he would join the Air Force and become a pilot. And then he says he realized that the white man is not going to let a black man become a pilot. And he was saying this decades after the Tennessee Airmen had established their reputation in combat in Europe. But the hopelessness is one of the big products of the race industry.
Jeez.
That you have no chance. I remember giving a talk at Marquette, and at the end of the talk, among the questions that was asked, a young black man got up and he said, "Even though I am graduating from Marquette University, what hope is there for me?" And having gone through college when I was in the 50s, I don't remember any blacks saying that in the 1950s. when there was a lot more obstacles to overcome than there were when this guy is graduating from Marquette. But you have to produce that kind of feeling in order to serve the interests of those in the race industry.
Somewhere, watching this interview, there's a young Thomas Sowell. There's an African American who's smart and wants to do something with his life. It seems to me we've already got one piece of advice you'd offer to him is stay away from the races industry. Stay away from the race hustlers. What advice would you give a young Thomas Sowell?
I hear that a lot, race hustlers. Saying like people that will tell you things to basically get you to not even want to attempt to work towards your goal because they feel like you're not going to accomplish them because eventually somebody's going to hold you back. Damn.
How do you make something of yourself as an African American in America today?
The way anybody else would. You equip yourself with skills that people are willing to pay for.
All right.
That was easy. That was easy. Hey, look, man. Again, for those of you who may be new to this channel, I'm watching these videos. I don't feel like they're necessarily educating me because my mind is already there. I already kind of think like this anyway. I'm doing it with hopes that people who are subscribed to my channel, and maybe even in my family, I don't even know what family members are subscribed to my channel, but will see this and say to themselves, you know, just to make you think. Because I'm familiar with Trevor Noah's show. I've never sat down and watched a full show. I'm just getting introduced to Thomas Sowell. But my whole thing is that a lot of times in life, like I said, when I grew up, if anybody was hurting anybody, they looked just like me. It wasn't no other race. And I grew up around blacks and Mexicans. That's pretty much it. As I close my eyes right now, I can go left or right about 20 blocks. And I can't even, the only white people I seen were cops. I'm just being real. In school, the white people were teachers. So my whole thing is that growing up, if anybody was like holding you back, it was your own people. Just keeping it real. But I'm not finna sit here and punish my mind over things that happened before I was even thought of and let that get in the way of me trying to accomplish anything. You know, again, racism does exist. It still does, you know, but it's within every race. Evil is evil and a-holes are a-holes. But please, if you can take anything from this video and any advice from me, man, get out there and get it. Go get it, man. It's out there. It's within reach. Go get it. I seen one of my brothers, my Filipino brothers at the gym the other night. He plays basketball. And he was like, how you been, brother? I told him, I say, hey, just keep going. Whatever it is, just keep going. Shout out to my brother Nate. Because he's playing basketball now. Young dude. But again, man, appreciate y'all coming over and watching. This brother, man, whew, just to hear another brother say it like, dang. All right. Peace out.